Good evening, friends. In our domestic corporate law webinar series, today we are going to discuss about the labor code, our part 9 series, and we will conclude code on social security today. Last week, we did complete till chapter 9, and today we are going to continue the session from chapter 10 till chapter 14. I've shared the screen. Please confirm if you are able to see the presentation so that we will start with the slides. For this detailed presentation on the subject, these are some of the legends used in today's presentation of accounts audit. We have C&AG, Comptroller and Auditor General, IBC for some relaxation available in terms of determination of dues from the employer concerned, and of course Social Security Organization. We have already discussed various organizations which form part of Social Security Organization. That is your board of trustees of your employees provident fund, your MBC medical benefits committee, and then you have your National Social Securities Board, your state name with the unorganized Social Securities Board, and then finally we have all the building and other construction workers welfare board. Together all these organizations form part of your Social Security organization. Issues, friends, kindly do understand that there is power shutdown and hence there will be some technical glitches. Please kindly cooperate, and if you have any interruption, kindly bear with me. So this is the outline of today's presentation. We will first see the finance and accounts, which is chapter 10, and then we will get into determination of dues from the employer, and then moving on to transformation of employment exchanges to career centers. Previously you had employment exchanges. We will also see the erstwhile provisions and compare it with the current provisions in the code with a case law on this particular subject on employment exchanges and the provisions relating thereto, and a writ petition filed in the case of Suresh MP versus Deputy Director of Panchayat. And finally, we will conclude with the miscellaneous provisions in chapter 14 relating to application of Aadhaar under section 142. Let's now move on to chapter 10, which is finance and accounts. Friends, each of this SSO, which we just discussed, shall maintain proper accounts of its income and expenditure. When we say proper accounts, it is in such manner as may be specified by the appropriate government. Appropriate government, we have already discussed in our first session on labor code, those public sector undertakings which are governed by central government and such sectors which are governed by state government, the state government. And these accounts shall be annually audited by the C&AG, your Comptroller and Auditor General of India, and any expenditure which is incurred by this C&AG, that has to be reimbursed, because C&AG is incurring the expenditure on behalf of these SSOs and it has to be reimbursed by these SSOs. And these SSOs shall frame a budget each year, which will certainly have the component to meet their liabilities for the year regarding the expenditure or any debts which they owe. All their obligations put together in that particular budget shall be factored in together with the working balance that they have. So this budget shall also be, before it is approved, it shall certainly be laid before the appropriate government to take their views with regard to the manner in which such receipts and expenditure are proposed to be dealt with by this SSO in the subsequent year. And then the fund maintained by this SSO or an establishment which is falling under this code shall be valued by a valuer or an actuary in relation to those assets and liabilities at such intervals as specified in the code. If you see the code, it talks about annually such valuation to happen in the case of board being your employees provident fund board of trustees, and in the case of corporation, being your ESI, Employee State Insurance Corporation, once in every 3 years, or in the case of any other establishment under this code by the appropriate government, or each fund maintained by SSO in such manner as specified by the appropriate government. And SSO, except corporation for this purpose is your Employee State Insurance Corporation. They have the right to acquire and hold movable and immovable property. Further, they have the right to sell or transfer the property, invest any money which is not required immediately for the purpose of dispensing with their liabilities, raising loans, and constituting benefit funds. These benefit funds could be the fund, pension fund, or any other benefit fund which is established for the purpose of meeting the obligations of the employees, except with the prior approval or as per the conditions laid down by the appropriate government. This appropriate government shall cause all these copies of the annual report, the budget which we just discussed, audited reports of the Comptroller and Auditor General, together with all the comments as are provided by these SSOs, to be laid before the House of Parliament or the state legislature, as it is applicable for each house. And these SSOs shall first step is to lay it before the appropriate government, and subsequently the appropriate government shall lay these copies before the House of Parliament. We are moving on to the next chapter, chapter 11, which also deals with the determination of dues from employer. If you read this chapter, it talks about assessment, compliance, authority, where in compliance you have all the details regarding the maintenance of records and returns to be filed by under this particular code by the employer, by any establishment for the purpose of compliance. And when it comes to assessment, here it talks about the determination of dues from the employer and how it shall be recovered. Where there is a liability, how it shall be recovered shall be next seen. You're now able to see the screen, Aishwarya. Just confirm. Great. So we are now moving on to chapter 11, dealing with the assessment to determine the dues and how the authorized officer is appointed. Central government may by notification authorize such officers as authorized officer. First, for deciding the dispute under chapter 3 or 4. Here, determination of dispute is ascertaining the liability which is occurring under chapter 3 or 4, which is relating to your ESI or provident fund. And then comes determining the dues from the employer, ascertaining what exactly is the liability from the employer, and to conduct inquiry as may be required or as may be deemed fit for the purpose of authorizing these officers to determine the dues. In all these three instances, to empower this authorized officer to step into the shoes and ascertain the exact liability or the dispute relating to this liability. And this particular officer has all the powers of civil court under this Code of Civil Procedure Code 1908, which means he has the authority to enforce the attendance of any person or examining them on oath and requiring them to produce the documents, discovery of these documents, and also to enforce the attendance of witnesses and also receiving evidence on affidavit. What is the consequence or effect if there is a failure to attend the inquiry or produce the documents? In such case, inquiry officer may decide the applicability of the relevant provisions of this code. The officer has the authority to determine the amount due from the employer on the basis of the documents produced during such inquiry and such other documents as are available on record with the inquiry officer. So he has the authority in the event of failure to produce the documents or in the event of any person failing to attend the inquiry thereon. Appeal against the order. Where there is an order passed determining the dues and the employer is not satisfied with the order, he may prefer an appeal and the limitation time is within 60 days. And also he shall surrender a deposit which shall be not less than 25% of the amount determined, and interest shall certainly be paid by the employer at the rate notified by the central government from the actual date where the liability is determined till the date when it is actually paid. And power to recover the damages if the employer makes any default, he is liable to pay under the code. Such officer may levy, who is appointed by the appropriate government, may levy and recover from the employer by way of damages an amount not exceeding the amount of arrears. And here there is an exemption provided for the companies which are already under winding up, in which case they will be in the process of their resolution plan or in the progress of submitting their repayment plan, in which case if it is already approved by the authorities under IBC, Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, then there is a waiver for this particular damage recovery or waiver of this particular damage as may be considered fit. And of course, the principle of natural justice will also apply in this case, and the employer will be given an opportunity of being heard before passing this order or before the recovery of any damages or before the waiver of such recovery of damages as the case may be. And the modes of recovery of damages are: the authorized officer shall issue a certificate to the recovery officer for recovering the amount in the following modes. One is to attach the property of the establishment or employer so that the property is in distress. Here, there is a clear proviso available in the section which clearly says that the establishment property shall be first effected or adjusted before the employer's property could be touched. And arrest of the employer and his detention in prison. Finally, appointing a receiver for management of the mobile immobile property of the defaulter. Notwithstanding that a certificate is issued to the recovery officer, he may also provide adequate time to the employer for the purpose of recovering this amount, and he may ask the recovery officer to stay the proceedings until the expiry of this particular time which is so granted, providing some leeway for the employer to arrange for this particular amount which is determined as liability to be paid by the employer. Next comes the right of CPF, Central Provident Fund Commissioner, or DG of the corporation, your Employee State Insurance Corporation, or any other authorized officer of your Social Security organization to recover the amount due. Further to the right which was already available in the earlier slide, if it is determined that there is an amount which is due from any other person to employer, say for example, there is 10 crore dues which are determined to be paid by the employer. Employer in the case is Marathon Private Limited. And for Marathon, already ABC Limited owes a sum of 5 crore. Then there is this imperative right available to this particular CPFC or your ESI corporation or any other authorized officer of your Social Security organization, which could be your MBC, Medical Benefits Committee, or your Welfare Board, Building Construction Board, whatever it is. Those authorities have the authority to apportion this particular 5 crores of this ABC Limited and then recover the balance amount from this Marathon Private Limited for the purpose of adjusting the liability which is obligated to be paid by the employer, being Marathon. So if any amount is due from any person to any employer, the above authorities may require such person to deduct from the said amount the arrears so due, and such person shall comply with any such requisition and pay the amount sum so deducted to the credit of the above authorities as authorized in this behalf. The above authorities refer to your Provident Fund Commissioner or DG of your corporation or any other authorized officer of your SSO. We completed chapter 10, accounts, audit, finance. Then we moved on to chapter 11, where we discussed about the determination of dues from employer. Chapter 12 deals with the offenses and penalties, more to do with the default for not complying with any of the provisions of this code. Chapter 13 deals with your transformation of employment exchanges to career centers. Previously, you had your exchanges. Under your Employment Exchange Compulsory Notification of Vacancies Act 1959, now the code contains a provision where the terminology employment exchange is replaced with the term career centers. Previously, the purpose was where all the establishments were mandatorily required to notify any vacancy caused to the employment exchange. Now, it is still applicable, but the authority is shifted to career centers and no compulsion for the employer. There is again a breathing provision available. Just because this notification is made to the employment exchanges, the employer is not mandatorily obligated to fill that particular vacancy which is so caused. So no compulsion for the employer to recruit any person through the employment exchange to fill any vacancy merely because it is notified and the provision is still retained under the code. However, certain sectors are exempted from the applicability of this provision where it is not required for them to compulsorily notify the exchange or the career center. Most of the sectors are retained both in the earlier act and also in the new code. However, there are few additions we will see now. Agriculture is retained. Employment in domestic service is the same. Duration of employment of less than 3 months remains the same, and unskilled office workers was there earlier, and connected with the staff of parliament or any state legislature. Parliament was there in the old act and retained in the new act as well. Certain additions in the new code are any class as of establishment as may be notified by central government, or establishment other than government establishment with less than 20 employees or such other number as may be notified by the central government, or any such employer who may be notified by central government. These are few additions in the code. Not applicable. The provisions are not applicable till the central government by notification directs. Vacancies which are proposed to be filled either through promotion or absorption of surplus staff of any other department or any other branch of the same establishment, it is their own prerogative, or through any other independent enforcement recruitment agencies such as your UPSC or your SSC, Staff Selection Commission, or your State Public Service Commission, or any other agency which may be notified by central government. Such power being accorded to central government was not there in the earlier provisions, but now it is included. And the wages was a bare minimum of only 60 rupees per month in the previous act. Now 60 rupees is nothing, and hence they have provided this particular authority to the appropriate government to decide. We have to see as to what is the monthly remuneration which is going to be notified by the central appropriate government. On this particular subject, we will see one interesting case law. Suresh versus Deputy Director of Panchayat. Here, the petitioner was working as a driver in the Panchayat. Due to the new committee which was taking charge after the election to the local self-government institution, the petitioner was sought to be terminated. He was asked to leave the employment. Aggrieved by this particular order, he filed a writ petition before the High Court. The petitioner was granted an interim stay on condition of no other person joined, and it was also contended that the earlier committee had sought for regularization of the services of this petitioner. Hearing this, the petitioner filed a counter affidavit by which, Panchayat after hearing the plea of this petitioner, filed a counter affidavit. They stated that the services of this particular driver was not satisfactory to the panchayat, and hence he was required to be, this particular termination was provided by the panchayat, and they had authority to appoint any person to the post of driver. And hearing this particular contention of the petitioner and also the counter affidavit made by the panchayat, the High Court said that any appointment shall be made only after inviting sponsorship from the exchange as per the statutory provision under Employment Exchange Compulsory Notification Act 1959. And if such sponsorship is not received within 2 weeks, then only after making public notification and inviting a public application from general public within a period of 2 months, these establishments or employers have the authority to fill the vacancy. Petitioner did make a plea that he be continued till a person is properly inducted or on board in the roles as a driver, but the panchayat's affidavit clearly indicated that he was not engaged as driver after 17th December owing to his negligent driving. Thus, Kerala High Court in the written petition submitted ordered that the panchayat would be entitled to appoint any daily wage driver subject to the condition of selection process as specified, which means they have to comply with this particular statute regarding compulsory notification. Only after inviting sponsorship they may do so, and if there is no sponsorship received, by making a public announcement, inviting application from general public within a period of 2 months. So these statutory provisions have to be certainly complied with, and then they will be having every authority or right to engage any other daily wage driver. Thus, this particular writ petition was dismissed and there was no cost which was imposed. We'll finally conclude with chapter 14, which deals with miscellaneous provisions. Section 142 under this chapter deals with application of Aadhaar. Now that Aadhaar is made mandatory for any identity proof as per UDAI directions, this particular specific statute was made effective 2016, and the provisions are squarely applicable in this code as well, because the employee has to establish his identity for claiming any amount from the employer, be it his wages or be it the legal representative on the decease of this particular employee who is going to claim the wages or whatever emoluments are obligated to be paid by the employer, the gratuity, pension benefits, any other perks or benefits which are due from the employer to the employee. So all these to establish clear proof that this particular employee or his deceased members or the authorized representatives, such particular identity proof has to be established. And for the purpose of foreign employee, he shall submit the Aadhaar number for establishing his identity as soon as possible upon he becoming a resident. Thus, Section 3, subsection 3 of this Aadhaar Act 2016, the Targeted Delivery of Financial and Other Subsidies, Benefits and Services Act, which refers to an identification number issued to an individual by an authority for this purpose being your UDAI, after verifying the necessary information, shall squarely apply for this particular code on social security as well, for registering a member or registering the beneficiary for receiving any such emolument or seeking benefit whether in cash or in kind, availing services of Career Center, the employment exchange which we just completed in chapter 13, and also to receive any other payment or medical attendance as insured person himself or for his dependents. For all these benefits to be claimed, this particular Aadhaar identity is made mandatory. Friends, with this we are completing the second code, which is Code on Social Security. We will move on to Occupational Health, Safety and Working Conditions Code in our next Wednesday webinar. Until then, take care, stay safe.